Hi, my name is Triya and I've just graduated from Oxford Medical School. Today I'm going to talk to you about what Oxford Medical School was really like. I'm going to go through each year and talk about what we studied and what a typical week looked like. So I thought I'd start off by talking about why I picked Oxford out of all the medical schools. Firstly, I chose it because Oxford is one of the best medical schools in the world and I really liked it when I came to visit it at Open Day. Secondly, I also liked the course and how it was structured. So I did my degree from Queen's College, Oxford, and 6 years later, here I am, finally graduated and a doctor. So now I'm going to talk about how the course is structured. Oxford is mainly what we call a traditional medical school. They have 3 years, which are preclinical, and 3 years, which are clinical. And there's quite a big division between the two. So if you're the sort of person who thinks that they could enjoy learning from lectures and reading textbooks and articles, and also writing essays, then this type of traditional course is the one for you. I also hear a lot of people saying that the Oxford Medical course isn't very good because you don't see patients from a very early stage. And to be honest, I don't think it's necessarily important to just start seeing patients immediately without knowing anything. And also, Oxford does actually have some patient interaction in the first few years. We have this thing called the Patient and Doctor course, where you meet with a GP in your college and you talk to them about patient experiences, how to take a history, and then you do go and speak to some patients. So now I'm going to talk about each year of medical school and the type of things that you study. In first year, you have 3 main streams. So the first one is organisation of the body. So you go through each body system, for example, the respiratory system, and you learn about anatomy, physiology, and maybe some embryology as well. The next section is called physiology and pharmacology, and this was my favourite module, and you learn about how each of the body systems work, for example, how the heart works. And then finally, you have a module called biochemistry and genetics. So this is quite an intense module, and this is where your A-level chemistry becomes really useful. Biochemistry was never my favourite, but it's something that you only have to do for the first year. So on top of these 3 modules, you also have some other courses. You do sociology, you do a bit of medical statistics, and then you also do the patient and doctor course, which I talked about earlier. So the exams in first year are at the end of the summer term, and you have written papers where you write essays, and you also have multiple choice question papers. To be honest, first year is quite hard work, but I think because you're a fresher and you've just moved away from home, it doesn't really feel that bad because you're experiencing so many new things as well. Second year, on the other hand, well, let's get into it. So in second year, there are also 3 main modules, where first year was about learning about how the body works when things are functioning normally. Second year is more about learning how these systems go wrong. One of the modules is called Principles of Pathology, and this is where you really get into the disease models and how they work. So the second module is physiology and pharmacology, which builds on the things that you learn in first year. And then the third module you do is neuroscience. This one is one of the more difficult aspects of second year. I think most people who did the course with me will agree that second year is one of the hardest years of the degree. This is mainly because of the workload and the contact hours. So second year is condensed into 2 terms rather than the usual 3. And the reason for that is you do a research project in the 3rd term of second year. And because of this, you have a very intense schedule. So we would have lectures from 9 to 12 or 9 to 1 every day. And then most afternoons we would have practicals in the lab, followed by tutorials in the evening. So the number of tutorials you have will depend on what college you go to. But in my college, I had about 3 tutes a week, which meant that I was writing 3 essays a week, so it is a lot to fit in 2 terms. Third year is technically 4 terms, and this is where you do your intercalated year. They're normally called intercalated BScs, but in Oxford you get a BA in medical sciences. You do a research project, which usually lasts about 8 to 10 weeks. For the rest of the third year, you then have some choice in what topics you want to study. It's slightly changed now, but the way I did it is I could choose between 5 different courses. For example, there was infection and immunity, and neuroscience. So the one I chose was cardiovascular, renal and respiratory physiology. So third year was a really fun year because it was the year that you finally had time to do other things. So in first year I did about 16 to 20 tutorials in 1 term, whereas in third year I only had 4 tutorials. So it really made a huge difference. So at the end of third year you have to hand in your dissertation and then you have written papers about the module that you chose. And once you've passed those, you have a BA in medical sciences. Then you move on to the second half of your course, which is the clinical course. So the clinical course is very different to the preclinical course, where in preclinical you were based mainly in the Medical Sciences Teaching Centre, which is in the centre of Oxford. In the clinical course you're based mainly in the hospitals, the main hospital being the John Radcliffe Hospital. So the way fourth year is structured, you have 1 term of lectures, which is called LabMed, which basically teaches you everything you need to know about every disease. And then you move on to clinical rotations from January. So this is where you spend 4 to 6 weeks rotating in different wards. You do general medicine and general surgery in a couple of different hospitals. And the way that the exams work at the end is you have multiple choice question papers and you have clinical exams called OSCEs. So this is where you have to take a history and examine patients. Fourth year was also a really fun year. So in the first term, whilst you're doing lab med, most medics get involved with Changewick, which is an annual play that the medics put on. So my fourth year was quite different because it was the year of the pandemic, and as a result my end of fourth year exams got cancelled. So fifth year is the year where you do the medical and surgical specialties. So the year is made up of rotations. They're generally about 8 weeks, and you rotate between a number of specialties, and then you do an exam right at the end. You study obs and gynae, pediatrics, neurology, psychiatry, ORTEM, which stands for orthopedics, rheumatology, trauma and emergency medicine, and then you have a GP placement as well. So fourth year is generally considered quite hard because you have a lot of things to cover. So my fifth year was a bit different because of the pandemic again, so our rotations were a bit shortened, so we had to study more content in less time, so that made it a bit stressful, but I still found it really interesting because it was the first time I got to experience different specialties like psychiatry, for example, which I found really cool. And finally, you move on to sixth year. Sixth year, for the first half, is pretty brutal, and that's the honest truth, because sixth year is the year where you learn all your medicine and all your surgery for your finals. So I think what makes final year so hard is that on top of all your studies, you also have to think about your job. And so generally people apply to foundation program, which is the first 2 years after you graduate from medicine. So in order to do that, you have to submit an application and you have to sit an exam called the SJT, or the Situational Judgment Test. And the way it worked in Oxford is that our year started in about July and we had our final exams in the beginning of February the next year. So for those few months it's quite intense, but after that 6 years is really great. So between February to July, I went on my elective placement, which is 10 weeks, and something that I was really lucky to be able to have. So I went to India and Singapore and had a really great time. And then when I came back to Oxford, we had special selected modules. I chose to do things that were slightly different from regular ward medicine. So I did some palliative care in a care home, and I also did a creative writing module for medicine. So you have a lot of freedom to choose whatever you want to do essentially. And then finally we had some lectures to prepare us for our jobs, which generally start in August. So that was an overview of the 6 years. It feels crazy to have been in Oxford for so long. There were ups and downs throughout the years, but generally I had a really great time, and I'm a doctor now. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to be making a video talking more about my experience at Oxford and the good things and the bad things, so stay tuned for that. Thank you very much. Bye.